What should you do? And what should the Jewish community do to protect ourselves during these dangerous times? The question is increasingly urgent for American Jews in the aftermath of the recent murders of Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram in Washington, D.C., and the firebombing of peaceful and mostly elderly Jews in Boulder, Colorado. People advise us, stay strong. But how do we stay strong, and how do we project strength? What makes us strong? Jewish tradition can guide us. In this week's Haftarah, we read of the birth of Samson. Samson, from the tribe of Dan, was a judge in Israel before the rise of the monarchy. But what an unusual Jewish judge. His primary attribute was physical power. All of the other biblical men of God were distinguished by their intellect. Samson was distinguished by his physicality. He was glorious. The closest thing we ever came to a Jewish Superman. The Greeks had Hercules. We had Samson. With his extraordinary strength, perfect body, and long flowing, luxurious, sensual, never cut hair of a Nazarite. That's the connection to the Torah portion, which describes the status of Nazarites, male or female Israelites who took upon themselves the additional obligations beyond what were proscribed, including not cutting their hair, in order to demonstrate special devotion to God. Samson was so strong that he could rip a lion to shreds with his bare hands. He could tear off ropes, binding him as if they were butter. There was nothing understated about Samson. Brute force was his methodology. He came, he saw, he conquered. There was no need for subtlety. He had strong, impulsive appetites. This man of beautiful physicality hungered for beautiful women. He felt entitled to any female he fancied. And he once said to his incredulous father, "I noticed one of the Philistine women of Timnah. Get her for me." When his father responded, "Shimmy, Kindela, my bocher, my child, my boy, aren't there any nice Israelite girls from the Upper West Side of Dan that interest you?" Samson snapped, "No, get that one for me. She's the one who pleases me." One day, Samson fell in love with Delilah, a Philistine woman. The Philistines were a warlike tribe centered in Gaza who hated the Jews. I'm just saying. I'm not making it up, and I didn't write the Bible. Gaza was never good for the Jews. Since the beginning of Jewish history, bad things emerged from Gaza. Just saying. By the way, the Philistines disappeared long ago. There are no Philistines today. The people they swore to destroy, the Jews, we're still here. I'm just saying. I didn't make it up. In fact, we know of the Philistines primarily because of our Bible. Had they not been so determined and so committed to our destruction, as documented in the Tanakh over and over and over again, chances are very few people would have even heard of the Philistines. They're only known today, or primarily known today, because they sought to destroy us. Samson was the Philistines' mortal enemy. He slayed 1,000 of them with a jawbone of an ass. He carried the massive gates of Gaza on his shoulders as toys. So when the Philistine leaders discovered that Samson was cavorting with Delilah, they detected an opportunity to bring him down. They asked Delilah to discover the very question that I asked you. Bameh kocho. What makes him strong? And so Delilah asked Samson, Hagida na li bameh kochecha. Tell me, what makes you strong? It's one of the most dramatic verses in the entire Bible. If all you remember is one biblical verse, remember this one. Bameh kochecha gadol. What makes you strong? In many ways, the entire Bible and all of Judaism are preoccupied with this question. What constitutes true strength? 3 times Delilah asked, and 3 times Samson lied to her. Like anyone, I suppose, Delilah didn't appreciate her lover deceiving her. I don't think that much has changed in the past 3,000 years. I've heard that from modern couples too. Delilah complained, how can you love me if you repeatedly lie to me? I've heard that from modern couples. You don't love me, you just say you love me. I've heard that from modern couples. You've deceived me 3 times. And so, as the Bible describes, frustrated and wearied by her, Samson confided in Delilah. No razor has ever touched my head, for I have been a Nazirite to God since I was in my mother's womb. If I were to cut my hair, my strength would leave me, and I should become as weak as an ordinary man. Sensing that he had finally told her the truth, Delilah lulled Samson to sleep and summoned the Philistine leaders, who sheared his hair, gouged out his eyes, and imprisoned him in Gaza. Invincible Samson, as John Milton wrote, was eyeless in Gaza at the mill with the slaves. The man of all physical strength was defeated by the woman of no physical strength. Bameh kochecha. What makes us strong? The Talmud, looking at the story of Samson, gave us one terse response. In a wordplay on Delilah's name, Delilah in Hebrew, which sounds like the word dalal, to weaken, the rabbis wrote, Dildela et kocho, she weakened his physical strength. Dildela et libo, she weakened his heart. Dildela et ma'asav, she weakened his deeds. In this one pithy sentence, the sages teach us that there are 3 elements to strength. Physical strength, what we might call today hard power. Strength of the heart, what we might describe today as emotional fortitude or willpower. And the strength of deeds, what we call today deeds. Action. Those who rely on hard power alone are destined to lose it. That is the primary lesson of Samson's life. Brute force, untethered to force of will, is ultimately defeated. The Bible goes out of its way to emphasize that the most physically imposing man was defeated by his antithesis, the least physically imposing woman. That's the hook that every ancient listener would understand in hearing the story of Samson. That's the point. In effect, the Bible mocks Samson. A physically weak woman brought down the Hercules of the Jewish people. Hard Samsonian power is important, even necessary. This is one of the most fundamental lessons from Jewish history. It was among the key insights of Theodor Herzl and the Zionist movement. Powerlessness leads to catastrophe, mass murder, brutal dehumanization, deprivation, and torture of Jews. Powerlessness facilitated the Inquisition. Powerlessness fueled the pogroms. Powerlessness enabled the Holocaust. 5 helicopters in the air on October 7th and 1 IDF battalion on the border would have prevented all those Hamas atrocities in the first place. Since the Boulder attack, local, state, and federal security agencies have spread out across the city. Have you seen them in front of Jewish institutions? When I came to work on Wednesday this week, 8 fully dressed, fully armed anti-terror police and a dog were arrayed outside our synagogue. I approached them, introduced myself, and in your name, thanked those security guards. On the one hand, their presence, the threat of hard power, definitely prevents a Boulder or DC or Tree of Life-like attack. On the other hand, look at what we've lost in America. Look at what those haters have reduced us to. Cry, the beloved country. We have normalized threats of violence and hatred. Cops with machine guns in full combat regalia outside the synagogue no longer shock us or seem incongruous to us. I remember when we first installed our metal detectors. I was reluctant to do so because I didn't want peaceful worshipers and young families in the heart of New York City to be afraid to enter Jewish communal space. The idea of airport-like security to step into a house of God struck me as contradictory, incompatible with what it means to be an American. Have no illusions. This is what they mean when they cry, globalize the Intifada. Violence. 8 fully armed security guards with machine guns outside Jewish institutions. It is a threat first and foremost to the Jewish community, but the incontrovertible and ironclad rule of history is that while hatred of Jews starts with Jews, it never ends with Jews. It corrupts every institution and every society that tolerates it. Look at all those universities whose reputations were built up over many decades, even centuries. Look at how far and how dramatically and how quickly their reputations have collapsed. The Washington Post, the BBC, the New York Times were once places to ensure that democracy did not die in darkness, where we would receive all the news that's fit to print. They're now filled with fake news, propaganda, and even blood libels. Ech naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen by tolerating intolerance and Jew hatred. Observing the failure of so many institutions since October 7th, I often think of that poem by William Butler Yeats, Things Fall Apart. The center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. But Talmudic sages understood that hard power alone is not enough. What else makes you strong? They asked. Your heart, your will, your tenacity, your refusal to succumb to what you know is wrong. Samson's abs were strong, but his heart was weak. And thus, in the end, he was a failure. He had no lasting impact on Jewish history. He didn't free the Israelites from the Philistines, and he left nothing behind. No document, no institution, no followers. He could slay 1,000 Philistines in one mighty blow, but could not deliver his people who were attacked for centuries. It was King David who finally defeated the Philistines. David was half the size of Samson, but twice the man. He was a poet with a strong and sensitive heart. He was a deep thinker. It's a mistake to perceive strength only in its physical and hard power dimension, because then you become flaccid, soft, overconfident, like those complacent Israeli military and political leaders. You think that all you need to do is shelter behind high-tech fences and weaponry, and these will protect you. The Greeks admired beauty and strength for their own sake. It was enough that Hercules be beautiful and strong. For the Jews, physical strength, untethered to emotional strength, is untenable. But even a strong heart is not enough. Our strength must produce results. And therefore, the rabbis emphasized the third element of strength, ma'asim, deeds. We must also be strong in deeds. Deeds are the consequence, the manifestation of our strengths. If we are all talk and no action, all pumped up energy and no effect, we are not truly strong. And hence the rabbis say, Delilah, Dil et kocho, she weakened Samson's hard power. Dil et libo, she weakened his heart, his will, and Dil et maasav, she weakened his deeds. In Judaism, it's the deeds that count the most. Strength is in performance. Samson's last deed, the only act that the Bible considers worthy, was performed on the last day of his life. He was blind, his eyes were gouged out, and he was brought in chains to the temple of the Philistines, who were celebrating a great sacrifice to their God. Samson's hair had begun to grow back in prison. He leaned against the two middle pillars that held up the temple, and with one final burst of strength, one last fusion of hard power, heart power, and deed power, ripped the pillars, and the temple came crashing down. And thus, Samson purchased time for the Israelites to survive until better leaders came to their defense. All of us can do something great, even as our physical strength diminishes. Those elderly, bolder Jews are heroic. They'll be marching again, and again, and again. And in the future, many more people will join them. Such is the power of deeds to inspire others. And to all of our non-Jewish friends, I know we always have people who aren't Jewish who come to the sanctuary, and many of them listen online. Do you realize what arises in the mind of every Jew to learn that an elderly Holocaust survivor was burned so severely that she was hospitalized and will bear the pain and the scars for the remainder of her life? She survived Hitler's inferno to be burned 80 years later in Boulder, Colorado? In America? The land of the free and the home of the brave? The cause of free Palestine, shouted out by the murderer in Washington and the terrorist in Boulder, is anti-American. They mean murder Israelis, Israel supporters, and American Jews. My message to the Jewish community is this: be strong physically. Hard security around Jewish institutions is important, and expect the government, whose responsibility it is to protect Americans, to help fund the enormous expenses. You won't believe what we spend on security here. But not only that, be strong emotionally. Be stout of heart. If you are afraid, strive to overcome your fear. Don't let them win. And most important, be vigorous in your actions. Without strong deeds, strong values are squandered. Do not support those who do not support us. Do not vote for those who do not support us. Demand repair of institutions damaged by cowardice, confusion, or weakness of heart. And raise your children and influence your grandchildren to be strong, proud, determined Jews. Support Jewish institutions. Decades of neglect of Jewish education are now coming home to roost. And then, if we do these things, when individual Jews and the Jewish community and all people have these three strengths in harmony: hard power, heart power, and deed power. When all of these are in balance and in harmony, we will see a more peaceful world, a world of sweetness and goodness. The Bible tells us that one day while Samson was in the field, a full-grown lion came roaring at him. Samson tore the lion to pieces with his bare hands and left the carcass there to rot. A year later, he returned to that spot, and he noticed that inside the skeleton was a swarm of bees that had produced honey. And Samson concluded, Me'az yatsa matok. Out of the strong came something sweet. This is the goal of all of our energies: to become strong, and out of the strong, something sweet.